Hey, this is Mrs. Warren coming to you, and this is day 2 of the American Revolution. We have spoken already about the advantages and disadvantages of the American and British armies. We've had the Battle of Lexington and Concord, and the Declaration of Independence has separated us for good from England, and now we have to fight for the war. Now we have to fight for our freedom. Now, at the very beginning of the war, we had a really tough time. We weren't doing well. Based on yesterday's information that you received about Washington and the troubles he had with his army, he was definitely chased out of New York and was ashamed. And the country was really feeling like, wow, can we really do this? Well, he had a great idea. And this comes alongside a very famous American painting called Washington Crossing the Delaware. Well, he decides to attack Trenton, New Jersey. Now, Trenton, New Jersey was taken over by a group called the Hessians. The Hessians were hired mercenaries that King George hired. He had, things going on all over the world at this time, and his army was spread thin, so he hired somebody to fight for them. Well, it happened to be Christmas night. And Washington knew this, and he said, okay, this is where I need to attack these people to take them over and when they're least expected. And that's exactly what he did. He surprised them. Hardly a shot had been fired. This is called the Battle of Trenton. And, of course, you can see him sneaking across the Delaware at this time. He probably wasn't standing up, and it wasn't daylight outside. It was the middle of the night and freezing cold. He retook New Jersey, and a lot of people started to have faith in him again. Faith is a big thing, especially, if you're in that kind of situation where things are low and your supplies are low and food is low. It really wears on you, and so they really loved Washington, and it kept them going. Now, this is Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin, at the time, was over in France. We knew that we were not going to be able to beat the British, and yesterday the disadvantages and advantages you saw, it was going to be hard for us to hang on. So Benjamin Franklin was over in France trying to convince them to help us. This was their enemy, the British, and who else wouldn't want to beat the British than the French? So he's over there trying to convince them, but they're skeptical. We're not doing that well in the war. So why would they want to get into a losing battle? Nobody wants to jump in a fight they're going to lose, especially against the British, and especially in a war that's going to be super expensive. So the French are waiting for us to do something spectacular. Well, along comes an opportunity for that to happen. General Burgoyne is coming from Canada, or British Canada at the time, from Montreal. And the idea, the strategy of the British is to cut off the New England. This is where the rebellion started. They wanted to cut off New England from the rest of the colonies, divide and conquer. It's a great idea. Now, General Howe, a British commander, was supposed to also come up from New York and meet in Saratoga so they could totally control this part of the United States, the colonies, and again, divide New England from the rest of the colonies. Except General Howe decides to do something else, except that we have these awesome frontiersmen up there, and they are sharpshooting and taking out their Indian guides. They're taking out the commanders of their army, and that is not cool, because that is not the way you should be doing stuff as a gentleman in a European way of fighting. But regardless, it slowed the army down, and they were not able to function without the leaders and without those guides. So it was very easy for us to take over General Burgoyne's army. This was a huge victory. This was called a turning point battle. Anytime there's a turning point, that means one side has started to win, and now the other side is now winning because of this big epic event. Now, why is this a turning point? Well, for one, it helped finally to convince France, and not only France, but Spain as well, to help us. And they're going to help us by supplying us with weapons, soldiers, ships, money, everything that we have been lacking and struggling through. So yeah, this is going to make a huge difference. Now, before help arrived, we had to camp for the winter. You don't usually see a lot of battles during the winter time because it's wet, it's cold. Anyway, so they camped during a place, or to a place called Valley Forge. Valley Forge is in Pennsylvania, and it was one of the coldest winters ever. Now, in addition to it being so cold, we lacked many important supplies. Let me move this down here. We lacked food, proper clothing. There were guys that had their feet wrapped up in bandages. It was a horrible situation. Now, at this time, we had not to mention the smallpox. There was an outbreak of smallpox. We're going to learn more about that later. Marquis de Lafayette, you learned about him in your notebook, is a French nobleman who comes over and is so inspired by the Declaration of Independence that he comes over, offers his services and money to help Washington lead his troops. They end up becoming very, very good friends, and Lafayette becomes an American hero. In addition to that, Baron von Steuben comes from Prussia and offers to train the troops for free. And he offers Washington the idea to do this. He ends up being credited with getting our troops into shape, getting them ready to fight, and many other important military tactics that are still used today. Now, this was such an important event. And again, this is Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, because this really shows the American determination. I mean, they persevered through such a terrible winter. I mean, they were all in on this, and it was really a mark of their perseverance and determination to win the independence of their nation. Now, in addition to Lafayette and Steuben, we also had Bernardo de Galvez. He was the Spanish governor of Louisiana, and he was able to stop much of the British from coming up through New Orleans through Mississippi. He also has a town named after him that we're all very much aware of, called Galveston. And one last hero, John Paul Jones. Now, before you learn, we didn't have much of a navy. In fact, we had barely a navy. But John Paul Jones was our first naval hero. There was some fighting back and forth on a ship. They were throwing cannons at each other, kind of like what you see in Pirates of the Caribbean. And both ships were taking on water. He was beside him, and he says, the British commander says, "Hey, are you ready to give up?" And he says, "Forget you, I have not yet begun to fight." And he jumps over on the ship, and he ends up taking over the British ship. And so he wins many important naval battles, the few that we had, because, well, we didn't have much of a navy until the French came over and brought their ships as well. All right, that's what I got for today. Thanks for listening.